I'm Michael de Braga. I am a paleontologist, actually, but I work out of the Institute for the Study of University Pedagogy at the University of Toronto, Mississauga, and I collaborate extensively with the Experiential Education Unit in my role as the Experiential Learning Faculty Liaison.
My name is Rena Banwait, Manager Experiential Education in the Office of the Vice Principal Academic and Dean at UTM. I oversee the Experiential Education Unit, which provides administrative support to faculty and staff in facilitating curricular experiential learning initiatives across the campus.
And hello, everyone. I'm Adriano Pasquale. I'm the Research Analyst Academic Experience in the Office of the Vice Principal Academic and Dean. I support the Experiential Education Unit with facilitating research projects centered on curricular experiential learning, as in the case of the Linking Skills Project, which we will be discussing with you today. So over the past year, the EEU has collaborated with the Robert Gillespie Academic Skills Center on the launch of a new pilot study that focuses on improving the short-term employment outcomes of humanities graduates. With the assistance of our campus partners, we have been engaged in researching and developing an experiential learning framework to support UTM faculty with enhancing work-integrated learning opportunities in humanities programs. The Linking Skills Project was funded in part by the Government of Canada and the Government of Ontario, who are in no way bound by the recommendations contained in this presentation. Now, the Linking Skills Project was proposed with 5 goals in mind. First, the EEU wanted to better understand UTM humanities graduates and their short-term and long-term employment outcomes. We set out to collect data on the intended as well as the actual career pathways of UTM humanities graduates, paying attention to how these outcomes differed across program areas. Using this evidence base, we began development on an experiential learning framework that would help faculty and students maximize the impact of work-integrated learning opportunities in humanities programs. We decided that reflective practice should be at the center of this framework so that we could encourage humanities students to consider how the transferable skills that they develop in their programs can be practically applied across industries. We also wanted to frame work-integrated learning as a mutually beneficial partnership in which humanities students gain relevant work experience while also demonstrating their skills value to local employers. While the pilot study is UTM specific, we are optimistic that this approach can still be reproduced at other post-secondary institutions to achieve the same or similar goals. Now, before we discuss the EU's evidence-based and proposed experiential learning framework, I want to offer a bit of background context on humanities graduates, their current employment outcomes, and why we are prescribing experiential learning as an appropriate intervention. We are joining this conversation after more than half a century of debate on the continuing relevance of humanities disciplines. Whether the humanities is actually in crisis is irrelevant. The debate has persisted long enough to permeate the public consciousness, resulting in caricatures of humanities graduates as career baristas that discourage prospective students from pursuing these disciplines and contributes to falling enrollments in humanities programs worldwide. The rise of STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, has only exacerbated the situation. As educational policymakers continue to push through funding reforms that funnel students into job-ready STEM programs, humanities programs will inevitably be caught in the crossfire. We know that Australian universities have already been engaged in such a conversation with their federal government over the past couple of years. Canada, too, has been an active participant in this movement. Our own province, Ontario, aims to become the largest producer of STEM graduates per capita in all of North America, again drawing prospective students away from already under-enrolled humanities programs. Now, how does this misperception of humanities graduates translate to employment outcomes? Well, according to Statistics Canada, new humanities graduates on average receive the smallest remuneration in the labor market. Even after 5 years, when we look at the median earnings of post-secondary graduates by program of study, we find that 8 out of the 10 bottom fields are in the arts or humanities. One of the challenges impeding any intervention into the employment outcomes of humanities graduates is the general lack of available data on this talent pool. So much so that Canadian universities have been called upon to collect and share data on the career pathways of their humanities students, as well as the specific barriers that they face after graduation. I am pleased to report that in recent years, Canada has been home to new research aiming to rediscover the place of humanities graduates in the labor market. This literature suggests that humanities graduates may experience a challenging short-term transition to the workforce. Since humanities programs are non-vocational, it is possible for students to graduate without ever participating in career exploration or experiential learning. Without knowledge of the career pathways available to them, humanities graduates will spend the first years in the workforce engaging in low-paying, precarious employment that is incommensurate with their education. And while employers espouse the increasing importance of soft skills in the workplace, humanities graduates still struggle to find entry-level job opportunities that explicitly ask for their education and skills. When we take into account the misperceptions that surround humanities graduates, what we may be seeing here is a communications breakdown between university and industry that results in a misappraisal of humanities graduates in the labor market. In fact, one of the key recommendations in the literature is for university departments and employers to collaborate on the development of shared frameworks and skills definitions so that we can more clearly foreground connections between humanities curricula and employer skills needs. All right, so at this point, I guess I will turn things over to Rena.
Thanks, Adriano. As the Experiential Education Unit, our mandate is to assist UTM's academic units with developing and facilitating high-impact experiential learning opportunities in courses across disciplines. While humanities disciplines tend to lag behind the sciences in their curricular experiential learning offerings, UTM has in recent years strived to balance this scale with the introduction of an experiential learning officer to support humanities departments ongoing their academic internships and other EL courses. The Linking Skills Project represents the next step in our commitment to supporting humanities departments and their students. In order to better support our humanities faculty with EL course design, we began compiling a UTM-specific evidence base on the employment outcomes of UTM humanities graduates and their integration into the local workforce. We conducted 2 parallel surveys that investigated the career pathways of our humanities program alumni and how their education is perceived in the labor market. First, we partnered with our Office of Advancement to distribute an alumni survey through the U of T alumni database to all UTM graduates since 1990 that completed a program of study in at least one of 12 humanities program areas. Second, we partnered with the UTM Career Center to distribute an employer survey through the Career Learning Network that targeted recruitment staff in employer organizations of varying sizes that partner with U of T on curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular WIL activities. One of the challenges with assessing the employment outcomes of humanities graduates is that the humanities is comprised of many different disciplines, which can also vary by institution. Compared to STEM, humanities as a term is not as consistently defined. Since we are looking to create an evidence base specific to UTM, we limited our definition of humanities graduates to the program offerings of UTM's 5 core humanities departments: English and Drama, Historical Studies, Language Studies, Philosophy, and Visual Studies. From there, we identified 12 program areas for consideration in the alumni and employer surveys. The Alumni Survey investigated 3 research questions. What are the intended versus actual career pathways of humanities graduates? Do our students align with other graduates? What barriers may have impeded their short-term transition into the workforce? And how have they successfully applied their program-specific transferable skills in the workplace? We received 249 valid responses to the Alumni Survey and found that, in general, respondents supported the earlier claim that humanities graduates experience a challenging short-term transition to the workforce. While this may be the case, the employment outcomes do improve in the long term. Some of the highlights from our alumni survey are as follows. Most survey respondents indicated that they had pursued their humanities programs out of personal interest rather than for skills development or career preparation. And indeed, many recalled feelings of uncertainty towards their future careers during their undergraduate studies. Nearly half of survey respondents that had graduated less than 2 years ago were unemployed, and many had been laid off due to COVID-19, which suggests precarious employment. The majority of respondents in the same cohort earn less than 20,000 Canadian dollars annually. Relevant experience was the most common barrier among survey respondents, and many former students wish they had participated in experiential learning opportunities such as internships during their undergraduate studies. Since humanities disciplines are non-vocational in nature, they tend to focus on developing transferable skills that can be applied in many different roles across industries. In consultation with our humanities departments, we shortlisted 10 transferable skills that aligned with common learning outcomes in their programs. We then asked survey respondents to evaluate the effectiveness of their humanities programs at developing these transferable skills, as well as how important these transferable skills have proven to their current employment. In this chart, we have mapped the aggregate average scores across humanities programs areas. Immediately, we can see a disparity in the scores for teamwork and collaboration and oral communication and presentation skills. In both cases, these skills appear to be underdeveloped in humanities programs despite their high average importance in the workplace. Turning to the employer survey now, we investigated 2 further research questions to complement the data collected in the Alumni Survey. What are the transferable skills needs of employer organizations across industries? And how are humanities graduates perceived and evaluated by recruitment staff? Regrettably, we only received 42 valid responses and therefore must treat the sample as the anecdotal responses of a few select Ontario employers. Nevertheless, survey responses still reflected some of the concerns that we had about how humanities graduates are evaluated in the labor market. Some key highlights from the employer survey are likewise as follows. We found that the majority of respondents did not actively recruit humanities graduates for entry-level opportunities with their organizations. Most concerningly, no respondents indicated recruiting from history and classical civilizations, philosophy and logic, religion, and theater and drama. Most respondents expected new graduates to have some experience, and many were also open to considering experiential learning coursework, such as internships and fieldwork, as relevant work experience. However, we also found that employer internship programs were often siloed to vocational disciplines. Respondents did recognize the importance of the transferable skills developed in humanities programs, such as teamwork and collaboration, but they did not necessarily associate those skills with humanities graduates. Alternatively, they would not necessarily hire for transferable skills over a disciplinary background. Now I'll hand it over to Professor Michael de Braga.
Okay, so basically what we've been examining right now is the process of how do we encourage or how do we develop a method by which humanities graduates have a better understanding of what skills are relevant for the workforce. And very often in a lot of the stuff that came back from these surveys from recent graduates or individuals who are currently in some significant professions such as law and so on, they had a lot of interesting feedback in terms of what they've learned. And what I'm going to go through over the next few slides is just kind of give a breakdown of the rationale for what the experiential learning framework is really all about. And basically what we're trying to do is, as you can see from these points here, is we're trying to establish some way of connecting the curriculum more completely with local industry, with local employers. And the necessary step here is we have to ensure that students, faculty, and the local employers are on the same page in terms of being able to articulate what it is that they need to do. We also are looking at trying to currently leverage UTM evidence based in order to create an opportunity for students to develop these skills and be more fully aware of what the local industry and employers are interested in. Obviously, there's a need for collaboration with local employers, and we need to establish some sort of a long-term feedback loop that allows us to assess the quality of the current work being delivered in terms of how students are being taught and how this is being transferred. So if we have a graduate in English and drama, for example, who's currently working in some enterprise or a field of some kind, it doesn't have to be an English specific field, what are the skills that they were taught during their undergraduate career that are currently being utilized. And as you saw from one of the earlier slides, the ability to work collaboratively seems to be a challenge. And that needs to change. And what better way than to initiate a collaborative arrangement between students, faculty, and local employers. As we move forward, this graphic here basically shows us a number of things. So you have three different colors here. The blue component represents departmental structures that are currently in place. The green component represents student-facing resources or assessments and so on. And the orange components represent employer-facing resources and assessments. So this is a big picture of the relationship that we're trying to establish. If we go to the next slide, we can see a very specific example. And this is the one that I'm going to target because this often is the one that is unfortunately kind of set aside or not always recognized for its value, and that is the use of reflection. And I prefer using the term reflective practice. And there are many courses who engage in some sort of reflection. When I do presentations, as I work with many of these instructors who are engaged in experiential learning, and I work through the reflective exercise piece, I often start by asking students to tell me what their impressions of reflection are. And what often happens is they will refer to experiences that they've had, personal experiences for the most part, and very often they'll actually target negative experiences. They'll actually emphasize the importance of reflection on something that didn't quite go the way you wanted it to go, and you sit back and you think about what you could have done to improve or what you could have done differently. So it gives the sense that reflection is really kind of an afterthought. It's something that you do when you have to do it. And what the literature on reflective practice tells us is that it's completely opposite of that. Reflection is something that the most successful people do regularly. They might not even realize that they're doing it. So what I encourage students and faculty to explore is how do we, for example, relate an experience on the basis of trying to quantify or trying to identify a set of principles or present a certain quantity of evidence that tells us what was successful, what wasn't successful. And if we go to the next slide. So one of the things that we attempt to do in an experiential learning format is we, essentially the experiential education unit and I, try to engage with professors to develop course strategies that embed reflection within their normal assessment tasks. So it no longer sits as an add-on or as a bonus activity or as a participation activity, but it becomes embedded into the regular structure of the course. So I encourage reflective exercises to take place during the class on a regular basis, to perhaps take place in some cases in a course that I myself teach. I try to do it on a weekly basis where I have students actually refer to strategies or refer to approaches to delivering course material during that week and provide us with some anecdotal feedback on that presentation, what they took from it, what they found was the most relevant piece, how they, what potentially caused conflict or led to some misunderstanding. And when we do that, we're encouraging this reflective experience to become part of the learning process. And in doing so, we invite an opportunity for students to actually consider an activity or an exercise in a manner that could be transferable. In other words, if you did something in this course that is not necessarily just focused on the content or the concepts that were being discovered in that session, in that lecture, but also are looking at how these concepts were introduced, how they were presented, how did you identify or articulate your understanding of the material presented. Now you're exploring tools or skills that could be utilized in any situation, right? They don't have to be tied to a specific course. One of the things that we really focus in on at UTM is to develop approaches for students to expose or to be exposed to these internship events. And in general, they range from 100 to 200 hours, where they are tasked with completing or performing tasks that an employee would normally perform in that environment. And as a consequence of this experience, they are expected to reflect back on how have the course concepts and how these course concepts were taught, how have they connected with the experience that these students actually had within the internship. In a bunch of courses that I'm involved with, a big portion of the course criteria is usually some sort of a report at the end. We call it, in some disciplines, we call it a critical incident report rather than a reflective assignment, but it's essentially the same thing. And what we're trying to do is get students to connect their experience and link it to the course material and how it was delivered, and see where are the connections, where are the misconnections, if you will, what events or what activities have encouraged growth on the part of the student, have alerted the student to potential transferability of these skills going forward. If we can move to the next slide. So in a will course design, there are a couple of things that we have to really focus in on. Obviously, the learning outcomes that are designed with the course in mind have to connect not just to ensuring students have appreciated or developed an understanding of the course content, but also how this course content can be transferred to a workplace, to an internship, for example. And a big part of this is to ensure that the reflective exercises that are undertaken in the course connect readily with real-world applications, so that students feel as though there's a reason for doing what they're doing, and they're not simply practicing a generic form of reflection. In other words, in this lecture we learned this, and that. I found this very important to develop a better understanding of the long-term goals of this course, and I'm hoping that this will transfer into being more successful in the courses going forward. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, but that's course focused, and it misses out on the other pieces that really matter. And this is an area where STEM courses have been very successful, because historically STEM courses are easily brought into an internship environment, right? In fact, even without internships, they already have a practical component very often attached to it. There's labs, for example. The humanities has always been challenged with this. So what we need to do is we need to make sure we encourage students to understand that when they are reflecting on an experience they've had, whether it is within the structure of the course or whether it is, for example, within the internship, that this reflection is more than the sum of its parts. In other words, it needs to ensure some sense of how this is going to impact on that individual going forward, whether it impacts on them on a strictly personal level, or more importantly, in the scenario that we're trying to address, whether it helps them academically and after graduation, whether it helps them to recognize or identify potential career paths that they might have initially considered. We, of course, need to ensure that the course deliverables are very, very strongly connected to real-world applications. Where possible, I always encourage faculty to include current events within the structure of their course, so that it makes this realization on the part of the student that the information that is being delivered in this course is relevant to the world at large. I try to encourage a great deal more focus on formative assessment, where feedback really helps. So if you're trying to get students to, for example, to reflect deeply on the relationship between a course concept and their internship experience, you need to provide them with constructive feedback. This feedback needs to be productive. You need to identify where they might want to explore a little bit more deeply, what they've done really well, and so on. And of course, provide students with opportunities to further their understanding of course concepts through diverse means. So course assessments, for example, don't necessarily, and this is something I'm very, very much in favor of, is to reduce the impact of traditional forms of assessment. So, you know, the essay assessment, the final exam, the midterm, not eliminate them, but reduce the impact of those and encourage other forms of assessment, a little bit more in tune with how students currently are communicating with one another, potentially increase the opportunity for visual presentations, for oral presentations, discussion forums, that kind of thing. Again, always with the focus of trying to engage more deeply with the discussion points. If I can have the next slide. So one of the things that that very often faculty will ask me, and this is very often what I end up presenting to them, stuff that I've experimented with in my class and where the literature shows tremendous success where it is utilized, and that is provide faculty and students with a model for how reflective practice engages. And there are two models that I use. Effectively, they are the Deal model. The other one is referred to sometimes as the What model or the Driscoll model, but they all essentially say the same thing. And to apply the Deal model in a traditional reflective manner is to ensure that the student has been able to describe their experience, so that's the D part, describe their experience, their activity, and so on. Then the E part refers to an examination of the relevance of what they did. How does what they did connect the course concepts to the internship experience? And then the last part, the A and the L, is the application to learning. So how have the experiences that you've undertaken provide you with opportunities to grow your understanding, to see how you might be able to apply this course concept or this internship experience to future goals. Always keeping in mind that everything you do is meant to grow your understanding, right? Students sometimes think that they learn in silos, right? They think that what they learn in this course is focused on these ideas, and that's separate from what they're learning in this course. But the reality is all of these courses have some relationship to one another, if for no other reason, because of the fact that they are encouraging you to explore more deeply the understanding of what it is that you're doing, and more importantly, why you're doing what you're doing. And that's why the internship opportunities in the humanities are so critical, because if students recognize and begin to appreciate that what you're doing in this course, whether it's a philosophy course, a history course, an English course, it doesn't matter, that what you're doing in this course can transfer over into very, very different and unrelated experiences. I think they'll be more willing, or at least more able, to recognize how these skills can be helpful to them. If we can go to the next slide. Okay, so what we're looking at here is the experiential learning in a specific context. So I've emphasized these pieces where the key component here is a need to describe in detail what it is you're doing, and then how did this experiential learning opportunity help you to achieve a course learning outcome. That becomes the examination part. But the one piece that needs to be incorporated into this is evidence. So if you're a student and you're trying to suggest a certain you're trying to argue that a certain experience led to a better understanding of X. So you did something and this you're saying now, you're now much more comfortable with how X functions because of that experience. That's fine. It may be entirely true, but where's the evidence that tells us that that's the case? So one of the things where reflective practice differs significantly from traditional or more colloquial forms of reflection is that evidence is necessary. And that's what reflective practice demands, so that it forces the student to really deeply think about what that experience led to. And as they start to look for that evidence, they may recognize that, you know what, I still can't confirm with any degree of confidence that this has really made me better at doing X. And what that hopefully encourages a student to do is to explore why that is. So if you can't defend or argue and present support for what you have experienced as being beneficial in a particular way, then it means that something is missing. And I present this to students as an essay. When you're writing an essay, you have to state your problem, identify what your thesis claim is going to be, and then through the body of the paper, you need to present evidence, and you need to present supporting evidence that supports whatever argument or thesis claim you were trying to make. And this is the same thing with reflection. So that evidence piece really matters. If we can go to the next slide.
Okay.
So one of the things that that I would like people to do, and of course, in the scenario we're in here, it's kind of difficult to pursue this in depth. But questions that I often encourage people to look at is, how is reflection currently being applied? Recognizing that reflective practice is not just a means of collecting student perspectives. So this also matters from the point of view of faculty. And the instructor needs to really focus in on a few of the points that I made up earlier, which was to embed the reflective exercises within the structure of the course, within the assessment component of the course, to provide students with appropriate, relevant feedback that is critical of how they've addressed their experiences, so that they can actually begin to appreciate the value of reflection. And as they continue to develop a better understanding of how to use reflective practice, they will hopefully be also better able to identify the skills that they have gained in these humanities courses and how they can transfer them over into other disciplines. And I think that's pretty much it.
Okay. So again, thank you for listening. We're looking forward to sharing the full reports on the Linking Skills project in the new year. You are welcome to download the PDF of this slide deck through Canopy, where you will find also references and resources for further reading, especially in terms of reflection. We also do have some time now to hear any questions or comments that you might have on the Linking Skills project or on helping humanities graduates more broadly. Okay.
Hi everyone, Jackie here. Great job. I am the moderator, and we have two guests with us. Brennan and Jennifer came in partway through. Hello. So yeah, you have 21 minutes or so to conduct your discussion. We'll see how things emerge.
And Brennan and Jennifer, we don't mean to put you on the spot. We know you came in halfway through our presentation. Brennan, did you have a question?
No. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I'm wondering, and you might have said this in the first few minutes that I missed, how many students are going through this program and how long has it been now?
Adriano, yeah, did you want to take that? Okay.
So again, this is the first year that we were really kind of developing this, let's say, enhanced version of what is usually run in humanities programs. So at UTM, typically what we have in the most ideal model of work integrated learning would end up being academic internship courses. And again, this tends to be 100 to 200 hours of a placement where students will work with an employer either remotely or on site and just do tasks that essentially an employee would do to support the company. We have a handful of, I would say, and maybe a handful is even too much, about 3 to 4, I would say, academic internships in the humanities departments that we specified. Typically, this ends up being in historical studies, women and gender studies, and I believe visual studies has one as well. There is also an Italian studies internship, but that is also very new. Philosophy, unfortunately, philosophy and English and drama do not have any internships at the current time. And these tend to be the most common formats of work integrated learning that we've seen in humanities at UTM. For the most part, they emerged as kinds of reproductions of what was happening in the sciences and social sciences. There are other courses that have kind of pocket placements or more communication learning activities in humanities courses as well. But again, the humanities tend to lag behind what we see in the social sciences and sciences, unfortunately. In terms of numbers, I would say that I don't think any of the humanities internships exceed 20 students, and I think that would probably be even generous, probably closer to 10. I know the Italian one, for example, is very small. So what we're doing is we're trying to create supports that surround the experiences. If I even pull back to the, let's see if I can get there, this one here. We're trying to look at these courses that already exist in our programs and ones that want to be introduced into our programs, and develop evidence-based resources that will surround this to create a more comprehensive like pathway, I guess, into career pathways after graduation. And this kind of involves, again, implementing things like a transferable skills library, kind of a job index that they can consult as they're entering their programs and starting to see what other alumni from these programs have actually done in their careers. So numbers-wise, again, this is the first time we're doing this. We're slowly implementing all these pieces into existing courses with the help of instructors, but very much still in those pilot stages. So I wouldn't say that, I wouldn't really ascribe that many numbers to the activities as it's kind of unfolded yet. I think when we did the pilots this past winter, we did try to make it was mostly based on reflection. And we did manage to get, I think, 8 courses involved. Again, the majority of them were internships, but there were also some kind of one-offs that used it as an optional kind of supports to their assessments. I want to say maybe I had about 50 students that engaged with the materials that we were piloting at the time. But again, this is still very early in the stages of this project. And we're hoping to, again, work more closely now with departments to kind of start firming up these resources and really implementing them at the departmental level. I hope that answers your question.
Well, and do you have opportunities for them to work more than one semester? I know just in anything that I've participated with and all the kind of Chamber of Commerce people and everything, like always report, like, yeah, you know, it's you're just getting to know someone, you know, the semester, and there's rarely a chance to fully produce something that's going to be a portfolio piece or something for the student. While the student might gain, it certainly gains something being in that environment, learning these things, they don't necessarily have something to show for it after.
That's kind of what we're hoping to accomplish, I think, with the framework. One of the components in the framework would be I believe we called it, I'll have to look more closely, a student skills and experiences map. And so we're kind of hoping that this becomes something that's introduced to the students kind of right at program entry. And then as they proceed through their program and proceed through courses, they're kind of building this repertoire of skills and experiences that then translate to a resume once they graduate. In terms of work terms, Rena, you can probably answer this.
Yeah, I was going to touch on what Brendan had just mentioned. So further to what Adriano was discussing with respect to the number of course offerings that are academic internships in nature throughout our humanities departments, we have a handful. And our focus at the moment is not necessarily to increase the number of students enrolled in these courses. It's pretty much to ensure that these students are gaining quality experiences throughout their internships and really having our departments think about how they can reassess their current internship courses as well as consider offering new ones while keeping in mind the reflective practices that are necessary and really taking a deep dive into the skill sets that we want our students to develop. Now, when it comes to Brendan, the second part of your question was with respect to the work terms. Faculty members, they have the flexibility in offering courses that are either half a credit or full credit in nature. So full credit courses, as Adriano had mentioned, they run for approximately 200 hours throughout the academic term, and that equates to approximately 1 day a week. And this is intentional so that our students have the opportunity to also engage in their coursework while participating in this experience, this internship experience. We want to make sure that there's enough flexibility for our students to get that hands-on experience while they're at their placement, but they're not boggled down with just being at their placement and unable to continue with their studies. So I would say that it really depends on the faculty member and how they want to shape their course. And it also depends on the experiences that the students engage in. Depending on the partner organization that they're working with, some of their projects may be more intensive. And so we don't necessarily think about these experiences, okay, well, a student only completed, I don't know, 20 hours at this placement, so they really haven't learned much. It really depends on who they're working with, what they're involved with, and what are the reflective components of that experience, and how the faculty members and the placement staff are encouraging students to think about how their placements are allowing them to develop the skill sets necessary for entering the workforce. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I just, I know there are growing models of stuff that resembles internship work, like the Georgia Tech's vertically integrated projects model, and others that the attempt is like, how can we, like you're saying, that it's not the only thing they're doing, that they're taking their other classes, and this can be at undergrad level too, but the idea is to extend it over, you know, a year or even 2 years, earning small amounts of course credit, as opposed to saying, here's one term, because the term is a false, it just does not match up to almost any type of work that students are going to do. I know there's models being developed, we're experimenting with it at Georgia State University. Georgia Tech has about 40 universities, but they're more on the STEM and they've had more experience doing this type of thing.
If it's of interest, there have been in Canada a couple of interesting models that have emerged in recent years, and I hope I'm going to remember them now. One of them is from Concordia University. I believe it's called the Humanities Plus Initiative, and it's very much committed to kind of, let's say, yes, getting a work term for students, specifically in humanities. And the other one I want to say is McMaster, and I believe it's an apprenticeship program. It's very much more similar to a work term, I think, that you would see in kind of the co-op. So probably taking place over a longer period, probably 16 to 24 months. Yeah, both in the case of what we're doing is with this framework, we're kind of building around what's these academic internships, which are very short kind of or brief employment experiences. We're building supports around that. That being said, in some of our we have some hybrid departments also that have been exploring the option of longer work terms for students, and these tie into kind of more certificate models. Rena, I wonder if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so we are currently offering 2 certificate programs at the University of Toronto Mississauga campus. One of the programs, they're offered by the Department of ICCIT. Adriano, do you remember the
so the Institute for Communication, Culture, Information, and Technology.
And the other certificate programs being offered by the Department of Management. So they are providing students with an opportunity to engage in professional practice courses that help them prepare for their paid work term experiences. I believe the students participate in 2 summer paid work term experiences throughout their certificate program. So those opportunities are embedded within their coursework as well. That's another model that you may want to explore, Brennan, and I'm happy to talk to you about those particular certificate programs offline. I can provide you with my contact information, and we can also talk about other experiential learning models that are being offered at U of T as a whole, if that helps.
Yeah, if I could just jump in very quickly. The challenge has always been a lot of these programs, even ICCIT, have a connection to humanities, but they're not traditional humanities programs. And the challenge has always been, how do we get the humanities to have the opportunity to do what STEM courses have been doing? And there are some examples that I'm a little bit more familiar with in the humanities that represents some of the courses that Adriano is referring to. One is a visual studies course, VST 410, where they have about 16 students per year. And what this course requires is the students have to actually find a placement. And the placement has to have something to do with with the arts. Usually students find some sort of a placement, either it's in an art gallery or a museum or something to that effect. And the although the activity is not, I shouldn't say it's not sustainable, it doesn't extend beyond a year. So it doesn't meet that criterion that you're really looking to explore. The fact that these are smaller, especially in the sense of galleries, they're small institutions with limited staff anyway. The student does get immersed very, very quickly into how this industry works, and the students have to report on a regular basis back to their course instructor. I do an introductory reflective practice exercise. I also address critical thinking and collaborative responsibilities. I don't know if you're familiar with the Kolb Learning Skills Inventory and the idea of learning how to recognize differences in learning approaches so that you can become a better, a more effective collaborator within a group. And so I do stuff like that with this class. And the instructor also invites guest presenters that come from various related fields where they share their understanding and their what they're looking for in new hires, that kind of thing. So it's moving in the direction that I think that you're trying to address here. But I hear you. It's often restricted. It's a one-off. It's either a term or it's an academic year, and it doesn't really mirror the same experience that ISSOTL21 with the certificate programs is trying to mirror, I think, or trying to implement. So I think that's the challenge: is how do we get the humanities programs to perhaps follow a more certificate-based approach. I don't know if Rena and Adriana want to jump in there.
Yeah, and just further to what you're saying, Michael, in terms of co-op work experiences for our students, a lot of the students tend to come from STEM disciplines that are able to secure those work term opportunities. So we are very intentional with our humanities departments at UTM to first have our faculty think about ways in which they can integrate experiential learning activities into their courses. And then for those that are more advanced in that area, consider academic internships. And then of course, down the road, we may want to explore the certificate program at UTM as well for one of our humanities departments. But I think the issue with our humanities departments in general across U of T, we don't have as many experiential learning opportunities that provide students with a robust field experience in comparison to students that are from the sciences or from management, for example.
Well, even to add to that, I'd say that, and this is probably more of a cultural issue with these departments as well and their students, is that, a lot of it, they're not really thinking about career development when they're studying, unfortunately. I can speak on behalf of English literatures, for example. It's very possible to go through our programs without even ever kind of touching on career pathways or career exploration or even thinking about it. And I myself am the perfect example of that because I graduated from UTM without ever doing any of that. So that's kind of what we're trying to resolve here, is really to, I guess, convey to our faculty that, we can support you in helping introduce students to a myriad of different ways that their skills are transferable across industries. And so we're creating these resources and models for them, for the ones that are interested just in starting out with EL, to kind of get their feet wet and start introducing. And the ones that are more experienced, Michael, we have you to kind of assist them with enhancing their assessments, making sure that students are kind of maximizing the experiences that they're having. But yeah, no, it's, again, I think it's a very early position that we're in with this. And, but what encourages me is at least seeing that, at least in recent years, there's been kind of uptick in paying attention in the humanities disciplines and just starting to think of what we can do to actually find ways that will offer them comparable experiences that have kind of second nature or characteristic of STEM. So that's, and ideally that'll drive enrollments in these disciplines as well, right?
Well, and I've got to head out, I apologize, but I don't know if y'all are familiar with university, I think it's, is it Iowa State? They have a PhD program that's humanities for the public good, and they're doing, I think, similar work to what y'all are talking about. And then I've seen this guy speak a couple of times from Indianapolis, I think, and I think it's an American Studies program where the whole program is they come in with an internship working with a company, and then they take classes anywhere they want to take classes the whole time for the program. So they are deliberately choosing, like, I need this design class, I need this spreadsheet class, I need this, and that's the most robust one that I've seen. I mean, I think it's very small and boutique, but it's, and the students are, the companies pay for the student school too. So that's a piece.
That's very interesting.
There's a lot of interesting models out there that I'm excited about, but yeah, so good luck with the program. It sounds like y'all have a great start and you're building a great infrastructure around it, which I think that's always my problem. Like, you can make a deal with a company or whatever, but then it's just like, okay, the student got something out of it, but we're not.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.
Brennan, thank you so much for participating in our session.